DMF. I am your host, Justin Yantz, and today is the continuation of my interview with Tom Ackerman. This is part 3. He is a cinematographer for the films Beetlejuice and Ackerman. Enjoy. So getting back to, we were talking about Beetlejuice, and we were just running up. Is there anything else you'd like to comment about Beetlejuice, about the experience? We talked about Michael Keaton. We talked about a lot of the scenes. Was there anything that like you took with you throughout your whole career, or is like what would you say?
Well, not to dodge the question, but just elaborate on it, and to a certain extent. I would say that on a film like that, where you're working with a very talented director and a true artist, you're getting all kinds of stuff, good stuff, and that is not always the case, frankly. I mean, because some directors, a few that I worked with, are really competent. They're great guys, and yet they don't have the aspirations of making art, shall we say. And by the way, Tim, he would cringe if he heard me say that, because he's not a pretentious person at all.
Yeah.
And that's not what it's about. What it's about is looking beyond the ordinary and telling a story in that kind of a climate. Frankly, some stories are just more routine. They're like what we do with like bench warmers, which was Adam Sandler produced. That's a pretty good little film. It did okay business, but at the end of the day, it was about a social outcast team going to bat, bearing up under the pressure of the people who were scorning them. And it was
Bad
funny.
News Bears, it's a time old story. So you're not going to get, the lighting from Crimes from the Heart, where it's like, okay, we're going to light this all in green.
No. To the contrary, I wound up shooting so many scenes of necessity by the script on a hot, dusty baseball diamond in the San Fernando Valley. It was extremely unpleasant. Welcome to baseball. If you're the outfielder, that's where you spend your time. Batter, catcher, the whole 9 yards. There's always something to be learned. One of the things I found out in testing was how to adjust focus for a baseball that's speeding toward the camera at like what is it, 100 miles an hour. I mean, they go fast.
Could be.
Very, very easily. To get a point of view shot of as the batter is sweating, waiting to hit the ball. I found fairly easily that if you put the camera down there where the batter would be, and just have the pitcher do his thing, that it wasn't like figuring out how fast your focus pull should be. So we're talking about a really long telephoto lens, 200 millimeter, 250. It was just fast, as fast as you can do it. That's the speed. Bing, like that. And you might ask, well, how would that even be relevant to? It's an event that's over in a millisecond. So, but in our case, we were shooting a lot of those things super slow motion, so that the ball is going to, instead of like that, it's going to come boom, and it had to be good. There had to be a picture there.
And you don't want him to hit the camera either.
But David Spade was great. John Heater. And
fresh off of Napoleon Dynamite.
Just off of Napoleon Dynamite. And he was the perfect geeky, ill at ease in his own body kind of guy. Let's see. Yeah, it was fun. But it's not one of those, it's unfair to compare it to another film. because they're all different. But there's a certain feeling about a film that's stretching, that's really going out there to create a different world. Jumanji, another example.
Which we're gonna get to. I've got tons of questions about you. That's actually the next film
Okay,
we're gonna talk about.
Let me just add, because I don't want to lose track of another such film, but totally different, no gravitas, and it's just a kind of a cartoony film, but it demanded its own vision, was Rocky and Bullwinkle, which was directed by Des McAnuff, top award-winning Broadway director, for whom it was his second movie, I think. His first had been a small European feature, beautiful, but very character-oriented. Now we're dealing with the world of two cartoon characters who leap off the page and are drawn into our world. Robert De Niro, who produced the film, plays a fearless leader. Again, a very comic book guy who, nevertheless, you've got De Niro. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff to work with there in terms of his creation of that character. And for Des, the visual world that we would create.
With De Niro on that film, did you find himself, was he gung-ho about doing about being kind of a comedic character, or did it take him a little bit of time to get used to it, or do you think it just...
Not at all, not in the least. And of course, you have to consider how the project came to be. I mean, he was the head producer on that film.
Yeah.
So the only reason the film even got made was because Robert De Niro wanted to do it. So he and Des got along really well. He was and again, this is the mark of a real pro.
Yeah.
I think had he not wanted to do the project, we would never have had him in front of the camera. But the fact that he bought into it meant that as any pro actor, as any great performer, he's going to bring to that. He's going to bring to Fearless Leader everything he can. Yeah, if you glimpse a couple of scenes in that film, you'll understand that right away.
Can you talk a little bit about people talk about the concentration on the set that Robert De Niro has? Do you feel that when he's on set?
Oh, there's no yes, but yes, you do feel it. However, it's not an actory kind of thing. I mean, sometimes a performer who, especially a young newcomer to filmmaking, if they've done work on the stage, for example, they've had a lot of room to create film. You know, it's like often it's a close-up. It'll take a while for them to understand the precision, the kind of craft that goes into making that possible. But more than that, the characters that they may have been creating were human beings, not flawed, possibly very flawed human beings, but they were not off the comic book page. So, you know, Robert De Niro made something that was probably the silliest thing that he's ever done by design, but he did it with great style and with tremendous effectiveness.
You were talking about Tim Burton, and you're talking about how there's a director who will push things creatively in a certain direction. Can you give me an example of something that he did on Beetlejuice that you remember that was in that realm?
Well, I think certainly some of it, a lot of the most memorable moments, I think Tim's contribution came in pre-production, you know, in the concept of how a scene would be enacted, how it would be played. And to that, I would give you the shrimp cocktail scene, where the entire dinner party begins singing Deo. They can't help them. They can't stop. They're possessed. When we rehearsed that, it was on a Friday afternoon. It would be the first thing that would be shot the following Monday. And it was right away. And you don't always, maybe rarely know this, But when we wrapped that evening, after rehearsing that scene, I think a lot of us knew, I was convinced that this was going to be a memorable piece of film. And it was. Now, Tim had a great deal to do with concept together, putting it in front of the camera. And I think that his influence is felt in virtually every part of that movie. And yet, people would expect me to then go on, not you, of course, but people would expect me to then extol or recount instances where his vision was so out there, or not out there and conceptually, but just he would put it in front of you this way, this in front of your face, and hand you a platter with that clearly in evidence. And in fact, I think, and I found this out probably on, I think this began to evolve on Frankenweenie. I began to learn that Tim had a certain way of a language, and he had visual tastes that he was very clear. There was no doubt at any moment what we were shooting or how we would shoot it. And yet I never felt led around on a leash, not in the least. All I felt was, yeah, we're beating to the same, we're following the beat of the same drummer.
Yeah, he seems like he sets up a lot of things where he just allows you to play, but he doesn't, to me, he doesn't come off like a tyrant. Like, he's demanding this shot. He's very open, and he's not very like, if it doesn't serve the film, he's not going to just shove like a shot in there just to get fancy. He likes to do it, but the way it's crafted, it kind of gives it this different style that Tim Burton has.
Well, he's a very authentic person, and he really is an artist in the true sense of that word.
Yeah. Even though he hates that.
But he is.
No, he is. I agree.
And he began as an animator. He began actually as a wunderkind at the Disney Studios as a young man. I think he went to Cal Arts, but in any case, the studio soon realized, wow, this guy is enormously talented. But he is not a knee-jerk studio guy. He's not he with Tim, you always know, all right, you soon find out that what he is doing is very authentic, and he can live with it because it's something he believes in every shot. He doesn't just shoot a shot to be for the script supervisor to tick it off. I got that sense very clearly on Frankenweenie, and in subsequent get-togethers. Tim had wanted me to shoot Pee-wee's Big Adventure, but that didn't happen for the fact that even after a nice meeting with the studio, head of the studio, and the producer, it just that was not going to happen. I didn't have the clout at that time. I didn't have the credits, frankly, and I think they wanted to put the photography in the hands of a seasoned pro as an insurance policy. Frankly, they didn't need it, not with Tim. Yeah. I'm sure that was in their mind. That was like pretty big disappointment, I have to tell you. But I had a lot of work at the time. I was doing some, I was really into music videos and commercials, and was in demand doing those kinds of things. So I wasn't cavalier about it. When I got the call about the project having gone to Vic Kemper, Phil Gersh called, and I'm standing next to a big oak tree in Bordeaux, and with my wife. It was chilly, and we were in our winter coats, and but it was so beautiful, sunlight, We were going to be staying in a chateau that night that we'd been looking forward to. I had prepared myself for the fact that I wouldn't get the project, so I wasn't crushed. I wasn't. I saw it as a setback. I saw it as a setback, but by no means did I consider it to be the final verdict on whether we would ever work together again. And after that, I did an indie movie called Girls Just Want to Have Fun, which was very popular. It really caught on. The ultimate teen movie. All the cast members did very, very well, and it helped me as in the same sense because it got attention for all the right reasons. I can still watch it without being and still like the photography. So stylistically, I felt good about it, and it led to the next film, which was Back to School, which was a sleeper hit with Rodney Dangerfield. It was one of the top 10 top movies of the year. It grossed a lot of money. And so now things, that was like, there was a nice check mark by my name on the roster. Enough of a check mark so that with the one indie film, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and Jumanji, which was a huge hit, now plus Tim's own stature having risen since Pee-wee, continued to rise, I should say, there was no resistance from the studio whatsoever.
Last question about Beetlejuice. What was Alec Baldwin like on set?
Great guy.
Yeah.
Alec was one of those actors that you would want to hang out with, not hang out with. Actors are always too busy to hang out, but you would want to go to dinner with him, and we did. And when he spoke, you knew that this is a guy who is smart and socially perceptive. He's tuned in.
Yeah,
he's like a wonderful person. That's my perception of Tim.
Yeah,
I mean, that's my perception of Alec. That's my perception of Alec. As we all know, well, let's just be honest. I mean, he's been through hell with this situation.
It's unfortunate to put that on an actor. I mean, the whole situation. I mean, it reminds me so much about what happened on The Crow with Brandon Lee, and I've always remembered that. I don't know. It's a sad state. I think he'll be able to get through it. They can't honestly think that he did anything. I mean, yes, maybe he fired the gun, but the prop master should have checked that there was no bullet in there. Also, I think it's way too dangerous to use real guns in any way. I understand why they did it, but it's just I think you're kind of playing with fire there. What happens if something gets mixed up? If we all have just guns that are all props, yes, still dangerous, but that situation can't happen. I don't know. That's just me.
No, I think there are many, including myself, who agree with that. And I mean, the use of guns, if it's necessary for the movie, and often it's necessary to have a real, because prop guns don't have the mechanism that you need for ejecting shells. Oftentimes, I don't know if they have automatic weapons or not. I mean, a revolver is pretty easy to do with a prop gun, but in any case, it has to be under the strictest supervision of an armorer, not just the prop master.
Yeah,
but an armorer, an individual whose job description is to supervise the use of weapons, their functionality, making sure that obviously making sure there's no live ammo on the set. And if there were, knowing instantly how to detect that, whether it was a prop bullet or whether it was a live round. Well, prop person as you know, the prop person on that film was given sort of an additional duty of being the armorer.
And that's unfortunate. They're trying to cut corners.
Can't do that. So I feel that Adam's culpability is greatly diminished to the point where I hope he can get through this, whether he makes it through legally or not, and I'm confident that he will. He's got to be taking an enormous hit paying for all this litigation.
But I've got to imagine people got to understand that, like, that's not his fault. He may have pulled the trigger, but I don't know. You can't put that. Anyways, let's move on. This is a sad subject, and neither one of us can really. We just kind of have to wait and see with that situation. Move on to Jumanji, which is directed by Joe Johnston. Did you were you familiar with his work?
Well, I knew that he had directed Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and I wasn't intimately familiar with his work, no, but I quickly did my homework. I knew I would be meeting with him, and everything pointed in the right direction.
How was he working with?
Great. I've often been asked the question, so what kind of director do you like to work with? What's your preference? I said, well, as the director of photography, a film eats up a big chunk of your life, and you want it to count for something. You want it to work, and in order for your work to be mounted in a way that it can be appreciated and that hopefully it means something or it entertains people, before that can happen, the director is the proactive element. They're the catalyst to the whole thing. And directors have different styles, different approaches, just like cinematographers. So when I'm asked that question, I talk about it in terms of two extremes of the continuum. One would be knows photography, and a good director does know photography and its use in storytelling. They know photography. At the other end of the spectrum is a kindred spirit, somebody who is really a visual person. And they not only know photography, but they can partner up with you in a way that makes the work that you do as a DP better than it would have with only your ideas involved. And that proved to be the case time and again. Joe, having been an art director at Disney, he could do his own thumbnail storyboards, thumbnail sketches that would be nicely composed, and the shot. He says, I'd like to do this with a 75 millimeter lens. Yeah, I can see that with had a slightly long lens feel to it. Now, mind you, these were pencil sketches, and I don't mean to suggest that he had some kind of superpower, that let him exceed what you could do with a pencil and with a storyboard frame.
Yeah.
But the point is, the idea that was embedded there really made sense to me. And moreover, that was not the end of it, because on set, he was always very considerate of what the camera. He was excited about what photography could do. He created shots that could be shot, that could be framed, lit, and enacted in terms of camera movement, whatever. That these were not only shots, but they were really excellent images that could be done as he wanted and put in the movie.
Because it's interesting with Jumanji, because I mean, this is it's after Jurassic Park in T2, so the we're starting to see CGI, kind of show up. What was that like dealing with because did you have the animals on set or?
Well, no, we didn't have the animals in Jumanji.
Yeah, that's all C.
Whereas we had used them on George of the Jungle. Real animals were animatronics, which in turn would be supplanted by CGI. Jumanji, that was not the case. And we did have some animatronics, but not a lot. And there was plenty of animated characters. And CGI can create virtually any kind of a world you want to see. It can make animal behavior, anything that the script might say, or that you personally want to embellish. But there's this kind of like line in the sand where if you go too far, it looks fake.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work for the story. That line was always maintained in Jumanji. And where I think that Joe demonstrated his prowess to the nth degree was on our first day of shooting in Keene, New Hampshire. Maybe it wasn't the first. It was early on in the production. It was the stampede scene. It's when the rhinos, the elephants, and the zebras have all broken forth out of the game board and are stampeding through the town square. Now, you may remember, in addition to the people fleeing, the animals actually were trashing vehicles. An elephant stomped on a sedan, if you remember. Well, the sedan, that was a real automobile.
Yeah.
And it had a system of, I guess I would call it, reverse pneumatic arms that instead of pushing out pneumatically would be attached to a certain point in the body where they could draw down.
So it cave in.
To crumple. Well, like animals' foot, the crumple would happen. And well, guess what? That doesn't happen automatically. That has to be cued, but it's being cued to an elephant that is not there. None of the animals are there.
Yeah.
So if you had something to follow, you'd be able to get the lumbering speed right. You'd get the first crush, the second crush, and then the animal up over the vehicle and off it goes. Didn't have any of that, which meant that Joe Johnston, who was the one on the toggle switch to make those events happen, had to have in his brain, in his vision, play that scene. And here comes the lumbering elephants, and first hoof, second hoof, climbs off. So it was, and we got it one take. It was really going to be, we had 3 standby vehicles and 3 standby hydraulic links, but it would have been a pretty much scheduling not semi-nightmare if we even did 1 retake, let alone 2, because it took 2 hours to reset.
Yeah.
That was all Joe. That was his doing. Now, another place which was far less dramatic, but no less consequential and no less amazing with regard to Joe Johnston's skills of imagining what's going on, was in the attic. If you remember the scene where they're playing the game and the swarm of giant mosquitoes emerge. Remember that?
Yeah.
Swarming around them and between them. That was all CGI, of course. Well, there was a shot that was all CGI, but there was a shot that Joe wanted, which was following one of the insects, one of the mosquitoes around the attic, somewhat randomly, but not entirely. Fact is, there was nothing to follow. And so our camera operator gave it a go and, was so trained to make precision moves. It just never quite, it didn't work at all. So Joe asked very nicely if he could have a hand at it. So he got behind the camera, and now standing at the monitor, you could see what he had in mind in terms of the action in that shot and how the mosquito would be zooming and strafing the kids before going out the window. All up here.
But he was able to demonstrate that to you guys.
We not only demonstrated it, we rolled camera. It's his. I mean, why?
So that's his shot.
Yeah.
See, one of the things I like that you guys use for the Stampede is you actually used a real car. So you have that. You can't say it's all CGI. It's that part of it, looks real to the eyes, where I feel like a lot of films will everything CGI. And I find it's very hard with CGI to get the balance of weight of how it should feel when you see it. Now they're getting much better at this, but to me, the eye, they really can't replicate a human eye yet, because it's just such a complex thing. And the weight, I think the weight is the thing that always draws it to me. Is I'm just like that's not how the physics would work, but do you know what I mean?
Oh, you absolutely nailed that aspect of CGI. It's the mass and the weight, and frankly, boils down to how do things really look? How does a real animal look? How does a real? And some things, even anybody would be amazed at a space capsule blowing up in orbit. Why? Because we've never seen it. We don't know what it is. It's going to be flaming and spectacular, flying to a million pieces and re-enter the atmosphere. A lot of pyrotechnics. In many cases, no one has ever looked at an event, and therefore it's hard to know what's real and what's not real. I'll give you one example which is very challenging. The VFX team on Jumanji was the scene in which the lion jumps from the upper stairway to the mid-floor landing where the kids are, and before it's Robin's first scene in the movie. The first pass didn't work. Joe was definitely not happy, and you could see that when the lion impacted, it just didn't have any weight to it. It looked like I don't know what it looked like. It just didn't look real.
Yeah.
And so they made another pass at it up at ILM, which was far more successful, where you feel that cats they had that big cat presence when it.
I mean, you bring up a good point. I think one of the things that they did have on their side in some ways with Jumanji, that we're seeing that a lot of the animators that are now having to animate this stuff, is now that a lot of the studios want to do reshoots. So when you do a reshoot, you basically have to throw out all that stuff. And now they're like, okay, you got 4 weeks to reanimate all this and it gives it this like patch job. Whereas with Jumanji, you knew exactly what that line was going to be. You weren't coming back to reshoot that. So they had the time at ILM to animate it and to make it. What I'm basically saying is that the time I don't think the studios realized the amount of time it takes to make these things look the way they can. And when you push everything into reshoots, which seems to be the thing that's happening with these, is they'll take it to the focus group, and the focus group didn't respond well to something. So they'll be like, okay, we got to reshoot it. The movie's coming out in 6 weeks. I know that's kind of what they're doing with Ant-Man now, is it's like in January, they're doing reshoots. The movie comes out in February. It's like, that's a short turnaround. It's not a lot of time to get through that. But you see with Jumanji, and that because the CGI was so much in its infancy, they kind of allowed things to happen. I always go back to Terminator 2, because they had no idea if that was even going to work. That liquid stuff because like ILM told James, we don't even know if this is going to work. So it's like this gamble. If this doesn't work, the movie's completely, now, luckily for them, it did work. And then, you had Jurassic Park, and now you have Jumanji. And you continue to see the now we're able to do what we're able to do, in 1994 very fast. But in order to make it look and have that weight and the feel like you can have, it takes time. I don't know. That's me going off on a tangent.
No, but it's a very relevant tangent. But I would say that in terms of the VFX workflow and the creative stream, that my recollection of that film was that Joe was in sync with the VFX team, and in a way that was extremely productive. I mean, they got stuff done. I don't recall anybody being frustrated because shots were not working or falling through the cracks. And I don't think that the studio had to delay release of the movie because it had some failing VFX. But again, I think that was because you had a director who was a visualist, you had an excellent effects team, and I'm embarrassed not to remember. Do you have the name of the effects supervisor on your
special effects? George Bernoda? Is that Tom Backlock?
Yeah, they were certainly
Rory Cutler. He was the special effects coordinator, special effects technician.
There were. I just remember that the initial effects supervisor who took it all the way through principal photography subsequently fell victim to a very quick acting form of cancer and passed away. I think it was his last film. So at any rate, we won't refer to him, but without his name. But he was an outstanding contributor to what we were trying to do.
It's such an imaginative film. I mean, there really hadn't been anything like that. I mean, you had kind of the never-ending story. It's kind of like that a little bit, but like it's just I don't know. You talked about how you would set up everything. You'd shoot it in a way that was very, just kind of modern. And then when like these big things happen, kind of change that style around, which is very similar to kind of what they did with Jurassic Park. They always had it like kind of like you're looking this voyeuristic feel of the characters. They're almost being watched. If you look at the the cinematography of Jurassic Park, but that's neither here nor there. You talked in a previous interview about the perfectionism of Robin Williams. Now, you didn't say you made it understood that he wasn't a perfectionist in a way of like, I got to get this shot, but in a way, can you elaborate a little bit on how he was a perfectionist? I'm just curious.
Well, Robin was a perfectionist. There's no doubt of that. And who could doubt it with the history of memorable performance and characters that he has created?
Yeah.
And yet, it was never a hot button issue. It was never Robin flipping out on set, for example, because that it wasn't being done, that the sequence was not being shot the way he wanted or performed in his what he had imagined to be the performance. The only time, but at the same time, you knew that the character he was creating meant something to him. The character he was creating meant something to him, and therefore was demanding of everything that he could put into the performance. One scene that we shot that wasn't working was in the kitchen. If you recall the sequence where the monkeys are running wild and jumping on the chandelier and breaking dishes, so forth. And then following that, after they are driven away, Shortly after that, Robin gets into a dialogue with the kids, and it's a moment where he realizes what his father told him many decades ago, before he got sucked into the game, that he had to stand up, he had to be a man. And at any rate, the kids use reverse psychology on him, if you recall. The kids use reverse psychology, in which they sort of hint at the possibility that maybe he's afraid, and something snaps inside Robin, inside the character, and he really gets down on what it is to be in the Jumanji world.
He gives you the, because we never see the world. We just see him like he's got this long beard and everything. That scene where he explains to them like what it's like of you could die at any moment. I remember that scene.
It's a very strong moment and it's the birth of a new kind of relationship between the kids and him. Of course, they're using reverse psychology. They want him to think that they think he's a coward, which of course isn't the fact at all. Now, when we were shooting that scene, it was the day before the crew, or the U.S. citizens and the crew, were going to fly south for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving falls on a different day than Canadian Thanksgiving. And the scene just wasn't happening. Robin was having a rough time. When I say rough time, I mean he wasn't into it. He knew it. You could feel it. The dialogue wasn't coming. And basically, it was just the moment didn't feel right to him. And so he talked to Joe and privately and just said, this is not working. That scene finishing, it was the only thing we had to do that day. Not the only thing, but that was the day's work. And they'd already planned to break us early, if I recall, so that we could get out to YVR and take our flights home. So they wrapped early. It was the first day's work coming back from the holiday. Same room, same scene, same lines, even the same shot. So as you might imagine, there was a bit of, tension in the air. Things were a bit tense. But he nailed it, as he always does. And that's the scene that is in the movie.
Interesting. So he went back and he worked on it.
Yeah. Who knows? It's the only hang up like that I've ever. One other time, I think I came up with a suggestion or sort of an aside before we had rehearsed a scene, and I had this small contribution, I thought. Hey, Robin, could you come out just a little bit later? And I said, Tom, I can't do that. Can't do it that way. Okay. I'm not, far be it from me. I trusted his judgment, and it's not my place anyway. Well, I shouldn't say that. Cinematographers often get involved in blocking, never line readings. That would be a minefield. You don't want to go there. Blocking, performance physicality as it affects the frame and the dynamic of the frame, things like that. And by the way, most actors want to hear that. They don't want to be allowed to make the shot less effective. But that being said, when a master artist like Robin Williams goes thumbs down on an idea, it's probably really not good.
One other, Jonathan Hyde, he plays the father, and then he plays kind of the villain, kind of the antagonist that's like chasing them throughout there.
Yeah.
He's come from a lot of theater. How was he to work with?
Jonathan Hyde was great to work with.
Yeah.
Theatrical training, I think, contributed a lot of discipline to what he brought to the set. And he was never even slightly unprepared for the demands of a given scene. And where a lot of that reached its peak was, and very, very little of it is played in the present day before the game board takes over. And now Jonathan is seen as the big game hunter who's now looking for the family.
Yeah.
But he had some things that are, it was the scene where he's chasing the family with that enormous rifle.
Yeah.
There was a lot to that was physically challenging, and also he had action that was so over the top, so melodramatic anyway, it was written that way, that had he taken it just a little further, it could have been completely bogus, just like people are, oh.
Yeah.
But he kept the character in this very demanding role that required excess and melodrama without ever making it bogus.
Well, he hit that like fine line there, and a lot of that comes from, from the theater, playing melodramatic characters similar to that, and being able to do that and being able to hit the mark and not just, clever twist. This here he is the father, and now he's got to kind of confront his father in some ways, the thing that he's really afraid of.
Yeah.
All along.
It was a brilliant script turn, and it worked beautifully.
What happened? Okay, that about does it for part 3 of my interview with Tom Ackerman. I want to thank Tom for coming on and being so gracious with his time. As always, you can find me at Justin Yachts, and please like, share, and subscribe, and check out the YouTube channel. And I will see you next time on the DMF.